Hello everyone, it's Taki72 here, and for today, so throughout Sonic's 30 years of history, his games have always gotten ups and downs, but one of the big highlights I just want to talk about a lot in this video has gotta be with the crossover aspect. Now, nowadays, crossovers are usually seen as pretty stale and that they don't really come off as special and feels more so like fan service, if anything. But Sonic, in some occasions, whenever the crossovers hit right, it always hits really good. Not to mention that with the recent Crossworld that came out like almost a month ago, I thought making this video would make me think, let's go through what Sonic had throughout its 30 years of history by basically going and looking back from all of the fan-made and official stuff that Sonic has crossover with throughout his 3 decades of history. So let's really start things pretty slowly. We gotta talk about some of the most recognizable fan projects of all time, that being Super Mario Bros. Z. At the peak of 2006 and when Nintendo and Sega's rivalry was starting to wear it down as time went on, Mario Bros. Z was like a really good example of that. A lot of people tend to recognize many characters that came from Mario Z before they even learned of their official appearances. Mecha Sonic, the Axum Rangers, but the biggest aspect of what made Mario Bros. Z stand out was that it was a really good sprite animation for the time of 2006 and that it had Sonic and Shadow as a part of it. It may have been a fan project, but it is a fan project that has truly impacted a lot of media throughout the years, and a lot of people to this day still wanted an official Sonic and Mario crossover that isn't just the Olympics at all. And when we go to the official stuff, Sonic has crossover with the Mega Man franchise, and he has gotten a couple issues that involve both Sonic and Mega Man teaming up against their biggest enemies, Eggman and Dr. Wily, of course. And as time went on, we would get another Archie comic series known as Worlds Unite, and not only did Sonic and Mega Man cross over with each other again, but it also involved other Sega and Capcom related franchises such as Street Fighter, Okami, Monster Hunter, Ghosts and Goblins, and even the Sega franchises are even here as well. This was a pretty wild time, and if you were not familiar with any of these franchises, then this one specific comic book series can really can really make you interested in these series. Like, I didn't really know what Golden Axe was until reading this comic, and even then I am really impressed that they managed to cross over with this many franchises in a span of like 3 volumes of comics. And really, the Archie comic days were definitely wild for Sonic back then. And when it comes to very official stuff, we also got Sonic crossover with Angry Birds, with Angry Birds coming into Sonic Grip Forces, Speed Battle, and then Sonic would eventually be coming into the Angry Birds franchise itself, since the series is now being owned by Sega, with Rovio now being, bought out by Sega. It just kind of makes sense that they would do that. And of course, Sonic would be able to cross over with some of Sega's other properties, like for example Super Monkey Ball. You also got Yakuza, or more specifically the spin-off Lost Judgment, and then the latest that had come out would be Shinobi Art of Vengeance, where we got ourselves Eggman as a guest villain alongside 2 other guest villains from Sega's other properties. So yeah, you can see that there's quite a lot to go over here. But what I feel was when Sega delved into Sonic crossover with series was when the games themselves would then cross over into Sonic's very own games. The first instance would be Sega Superstars, which is essentially just a party game that was mostly like a testing ground as to see whether the fans would really enjoy this. And I haven't really heard much about Sega Superstars, and this is something I don't really hear people talk about that often when talking about Sonic and Sega's very own, franchises crossover with each other. It is just a party game after all, so not much to say here. The next game would come out would be Sega Superstars Tennis, which is literally just the equivalent to Mario Tennis but with Sonic and Sega characters. But that idea really stuck to Sega a lot, as there would eventually be added for the game of Sonic Riders and Zero Gravity, as we had characters like Ooh La La, Amigo, II, and Knights. But the best example of the crossover with Sonic and Sega was with the All-Star franchise. I've already shown an example with Sega Superstars and Tennis, but the one I feel like would really stand out the most has gotta be the Racing franchise. The first one has gotta be with Sonic and Sega's All-Star Racing, as this not only includes Sonic and other Sega properties, which while it is mainly just a Sonic game, it really stand out a lot because of the other series that they put that not a lot of people tend to recognize nowadays, such as, like, for example, Fantasy Zone, House of the Dead, and the Bonanza Bros. Like, those are something I don't really know why they would add, but it's such a really good way of telling us that Sega has quite a good history with these series, even though they don't really touch upon them nowadays. Even Jet Set Radio's on there, despite it being on a hiatus at the time. And yes, if you also got the Xbox version of the game, you would be able to play as Banjo-Kazooie, and it makes sense why that's the case, because, you know, Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts is all about vehicles, so it's why they chose this version of Banjo and not the rare version that a lot of people recognize. Initially in the Wii version, we were almost supposed to be having Mario as an Wii exclusive, but Sega decided not to add that because it would interfere with the Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games series, which I find it to be a pretty dumb excuse to this very day, but it is what it is. I don't really know what Nintendo's excuse is nowadays as to why he wasn't added in the latest crossover title, but I don't really bother by that. But then the sequel after All-Stars Racing would be Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transform, and that's when the crossovers got really wild with these choices. Like, you have series from the typical Sonic and Sega stuff, but then you also have franchises that I never thought I would see even be added. Like, for example, Wreck-It Ralph to coincide with the Wreck-It Ralph movie. Then there was also Team Fortress 2, Football Manager, Danica Patrick from NASCAR, and that's quite a bizarre choice to say the least. And then there was even Simon from Yodcast, and from what I looked up, it was apparently a Minecraft commentary channel. That is a very wild choice to be added, but Transform is probably the most notable when it comes to the crossover stuff, because it had choices that I did not think would be added and likely would never be added anymore because of the whole licensings and all that, you know, times change. So, but Transform was definitely interesting when it comes to the crossover. Now we would get to the latest title of Sonic Racing Crossworlds, where the choices they've gotten for the DLC pass become more sense when you think about it. I mean, aside from the new Sega-related characters like Ichiban from Yakuza and Joker from Persona 5, the DLC characters was when they got really interesting with the choices here, as they're out of the 6 characters that are added, 3 and 3 all have something in common with each other. For example, you got Minecraft, who had collabed with Sonic beforehand, which is why Minecraft would be added into Crossworlds. Then you also got Pac-Man, and I don't really recall Pac-Man crossover with Sonic beforehand, but what I can say is that the reason why Pac-Man was added was because Sonic would have his very own level in the Pac-Man World 2 Repack game, which is currently out right now, and I mean, it is a good way for them to coincide with both games coming out within the same week from each other. So you can see that Sega and Bandai Namco all had something planned with each other, and Mega Man at first did feel kind of weird until I remembered that Sonic and Mega Man had crossover in the Archie comic days, so that right there makes sense. But then you also got SpongeBob, the Ninja Turtles, and Avatar: The Last Airbender, all of which come from Nickelodeon properties and to an extent Paramount properties. I mean, it makes sense if you think about it. With the big success of the Sonic movie franchise and then the 4th movie coming out in 2027, it makes sense why Sega and Paramount would add some series that belongs to them. They are in good terms with each other, and depending on the next few years, maybe we could get more Paramount related stuff with Sonic. I mean, it's definitely unknown at that point, but Crossworlds and the whole racing franchise was really wild when it comes to these new additions. Now, what I feel is the most iconic part of Sonic's 30 years of crossovers was when Sonic would be able to be added into Nintendo's other games as time goes on. Now, the first instance, while isn't a crossover, you can tell that there was definitely some intention behind it, and knowing the developers behind the game of Donkey Kong Country 2, then you can see that it kind of counts as, you can say, the first instance of Sonic going into a Nintendo game. The first one would be Donkey Kong Country 2, where in the very end of the game, in Cranky's Video Game Heroes, you can see in the podium, you got Mario, Link, and Yoshi in like the top 3, but if you see in the very corner, you notice that Sonic's shoes is right there next to a trash bin. This type of act would basically set up the years of Sonic and Mario's big rivalry as Nintendo and Sega would basically start this sort of feud for at least a good decade. While the rivalry only lasted for at least a good while, you can see that there was quite a lot of history just behind this one action alone. And as years went by, Sega and Nintendo would eventually be having Sonic into Nintendo's own games. For example, Super Mario Maker had its very own Sonic Amiibo showcase where you can play as a Sonic character by tapping the Sonic Amiibo, and that would also be the same thing for Yoshi's Woolly World, where you can have a character skin that is based on Sonic the Hedgehog. But 2 series I want to point out the most has gotta be Smash Bros. And Mario Sonic at the Olympics. Smash Bros. to this very day, I think we can all agree that Sonic's inclusion back in Smash Brawl was still a huge deal for the franchise. Even in October of 2007, having Sonic being added into Smash Brothers is the equivalent to like adding Cloud from Final Fantasy or Steve from Minecraft. Sonic was like one of the first third-party characters to be added into Smash Brothers after Snake, and even to this day, it is still a monumental moment for the franchise. And yeah, time goes by, and Sonic's character did sort of become a bit worn down and flanderized due to the writing that took place in the meta era. But Sonic's character and moveset, despite it being dull and bland now, you can see that this was still a really good thing that was even added to begin with. And then the other part has got to be with Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games. As I mentioned earlier, Mario was almost meant to be added into the racing game, but couldn't because of the possible interference with the Olympic Games. And while I don't really agree with that stance, what I can say is that the Olympic Games, no matter how bland it got throughout the years, Mario and Sonic crossover in an official game was still a huge deal, especially when Nintendo and Sega's rivalry was not exactly much of a rivalry anymore. We do see that every so often, but it's not as intense as they were in the 90s or the 2000s. And yeah, seeing Mario and Sonic characters all going on in like sports was still a really good highlight for whenever I played the original Wii game and then London 2012 and all that. And yeah, years went by, and I think it's clear by now that the Olympic Games became not only stale but also corporate, and it was showing from the fact that it became to the point where it overstayed its welcome. And funny enough is that the 2020 Tokyo Olympic Games was like the last time the series has gotten any new installments, because after that it was just the Olympics cutting off ties with Sega and Nintendo, and that's about it. Though it seems Sega might be partnering up with the Olympic Games once again, as recently this tweet came out where you get to see Sonic collaborating with the Olympics, which will be given more information in 2026, but we don't know for sure. But I think this is a clear sign that Sega might be partnering up with the Olympics once again. We don't know for sure, but hey, it is cool that they're kind of in good terms, even despite after what happened with the franchise. But of course, the last thing I want to talk about in terms of Nintendo related stuff is when Sonic Lost World had its own DLC packs. Yeah, Sonic Lost World nowadays is seen as probably one of the worst games in the meta era, but one thing I want to give a huge highlight to Lost World was when it had its two DLC packs relating to Nintendo properties, notably the first pack being based on The Legend of Zelda and the second pack based on Yoshi's Island of all things. This is such a cool thing to have, as we not only get to see Sonic in a different style of area that isn't just the world he's in, but to also see the collaboration in between of Nintendo and Sega is really cool. I mean, Sonic wearing the iconic green tunic and then Sonic in a world that is basically based on Yoshi's story is such a cool concept. And unfortunately, it is a shame that we aren't able to play this DLC nowadays since the Wii U eShop is now closed. But hey, what are mods for? Now to head back on to things, we also got a collaboration with Minecraft that happened for its 30th anniversary. As I said earlier, Minecraft was added into Sonic Crossworlds. But beforehand, we did have an official Sonic mashup pack that was added into Minecraft's Bedrock Edition, where in this collab, this kind of feels like a Sonic game in some cases. Like, it doesn't play like Minecraft, and in a way, it kind of plays like a Sonic game where you run through 3 iconic levels and, collect rings and all characters, and pretty much that's kind of what it does. It is a Minecraft game, but with Sonic related stuff. Later on, we would eventually get a texture add-on pack that was added into Minecraft later on. I haven't really bought this one yet because I'm not really too sure how it's different from the actual Sonic mashup pack, but it is still cool. I'm pretty sure Minecraft would have not been added into Crossworlds if it wasn't for this one add-on pack, and that was celebrated for the 30th anniversary. And back to some more Sega stuff, Sonic Superstars had some very odd collabs. Like, for example, we had a costume for Amy that was exclusive to IHOP, and you have to like eat a few food, like go get some food and then get some points there in order for you to get this costume, which doesn't really matter at all because a couple months later this skin would eventually be bought for free. So I don't know why they decided to lock this costume for like a good few months behind IHOP of all things. It is a shame that they didn't do the same thing for Sonic Superstars comic book pack. For some reason, the comic book skins are locked behind Kroger of all things. This is a very odd decision to come from Sega, because why did they make that one Amy skin free, but yet somehow doesn't make the comic book ones free at all, even though it's been like a couple years since the game had come out? strange decisions, but one I'm not really too bothered about. But then we also got Sonic Frontiers, where we get ourselves an official costume that collabed with Monster Hunter, which is really cool. But interestingly enough, in Japan only, there is a collab that is based on the VTuber Corone. Now, I don't really care much for VTuber stuff, but having an official VTuber collab with Sonic Frontiers of all things is definitely interesting. It is a shame though that it is only exclusive in Japan, so you aren't really able to get this at all. While Sonic may have had some really cool and some really great crossovers, there's also ones that I would say are mediocre and are kind of disappointing in a way. One of those that I would consider mediocre is Sonic Speed Simulator, a game that is officially made by Sega in the game of Roblox. Now, I don't play Roblox, to be fair, and as of the recent controversies that has been happening, I don't really think I want to play Roblox at all. But for what I've seen, it definitely is more of a grindy game, and I don't hate grinding at all, but it does kind of become a little bit tedious as time goes on. Also, it has microtransactions, I mean, because, you know, it's Sonic, and it kind of has to have that since it is in Roblox. But the fact that they were able to make something like this is definitely a positive of mine, though. At least I could say something positive about Speed Simulator, unlike Fortnite of all things, because the way they did the collab in Fortnite was really disappointing. Like, I know that people have been asking the Fortnite to be adding Sonic for all these years. I mean, it's been the case ever since they've been doing collabs, since like the Avengers and all that. And as with the recent crossovers like Huggy Wuggy from, you know, Poppy's Playtime and all that, and I really don't think I should be surprised that they would be adding Sonic at all. The only issue was that they likely might not be able to get the proportions of the character model for Sonic. And I have seen concepts of people saying that it is possible, because if they were able to make Scooby-Doo look like this and Godzilla the size of every other character, then Sonic might not be much of a bad idea. But even still, the way they did this collab was kind of disappointing. It was just shoes, and not even the Sonic shoes. It's just shoes with like Sonic and Shadow color schemes and cosmetics. That's just about it. It's not really much of a collab since it's just shoes. I mean, there was also a collab with, you know, Epic Games' own Rocket League, where you can have Sonic related prints for your car, but in that context it makes a lot more sense because of the gameplay behind it, so I don't really mind this one, unlike Fortnite. Now, Sonic would eventually be added into PUBG, and he actually is in the game. Like, it isn't like some random character costume or anything. The character of Sonic is here, and we also got this really bad model that cost a lot of Discord for at least a few weeks, and hey, at least Sonic's in this game alongside with Skibbity Toilet. Okay, no, never mind. This collab is really trash. Now, interestingly enough, Sega had also collabed with another popular game known as Fall Guys. Now, while Fall Guys, I haven't really heard much a lot lately, and that it's kind of lost its fanfare as time goes on. Fall Guys was definitely one of the games that really popularized the whole live service part, or more so one of the games that really got popular during late 2020 alongside Among Us. And one of those collabs, aside from the many different series that they've done, has got to be with Sonic the Hedgehog. Now, I say that this is interesting because the one thing that makes this stand out more is that even though it is a cool crossover collab and having you dressed up as Sonic characters, I don't really think they'll do this again, given the fact that Sega now has their own Fall Guys inspired title in the form of Sonic Rumble, which is set to come out in November, but a lot of fans are doubting that this is going to be like delayed again for like the 6th time, so maybe November may not be the best time, at least when I'm recording this, but it might be delayed, who knows. But yeah, I don't really think Sega's going to do another collab with Fall Guys since they got their own game that is straight up like Fall Guys. But afterwards, we got some other things to kind of clean up. You got an official crossover with the Cartoon Network show, OK KO. I don't really watch the show and I don't know much about it, but I did remember seeing that one advertisement when Sonic is crossovering with the show alongside his buddy Tails, so it is pretty cool. I mean, Sonic has already gotten his own Cartoon Network show in the form of Sonic Boom, but to really see the official modern Sonic and Tails in the form of a non-Sonic show is really cool, and I thought it was such a great thing, especially when this was taking place during the meta era. But then afterwards, we got some things, miscellaneous parts, such as the Transformers figures, where you have Sonic and Tails as Transformers, known as Blue Booster and Wingtail. Very crisp looking figures, but it may appeal to many for many that might have made like some fan designs for a Sonic Transformer character, but who knows, really. This was a really odd collab, but something I don't really mind. Then afterwards, in late 2024 and in early 2025, we got ourselves an official crossover with the DC Comic Era books, where not only we get to see Shadow as Batman, but we also get to see Sonic as the Flash, Green Lantern for Silver, then we also got got Tails as Cyborg, Knuckles as Superman. You know, it lasts for about 3 to 4 issues, and they might be planning something huge like another DC and Sonic crossover sequel. We may not know for now, but this was a really cool and unexpected thing to see, especially when it comes to the collabs. And they already have merchandise for this as well, so that right there tells you a lot that this was a really cool collab. And to really end things off, I want to end this off with one of my first early instances of when the crossover stuff came really wild when it comes to Sonic, and that is LEGO Dimensions. About a couple years during LEGO Dimensions life, we got ourselves series such as Adventure Time, but most notably, Sonic the Hedgehog was shown as a surprise collab, which basically marks the first ever time Sonic has ever collabed with the LEGO brand at all. Now, it not only includes the character of Sonic, but also an official story that takes place in Green Hills Zone. From what I've heard, the story was kind of mediocre at best, but it is really cool to see the fact that not only we get to play as Sonic, but also Super Sonic in an actual LEGO game. It was really wild at the time, especially when it comes to the other series that came before it, like The Simpsons and other things that came from LEGO Dimensions. While the series is unfortunately dead, LEGO Sonic was still, if not thriving to this day, as years later, we would eventually get official Sonic the Hedgehog LEGO sets years later, and I thought that was a really cool thing to show that their partnership has not ended. And that's about it for everything that I've covered in this video. This was a pretty long one I want to talk about, and you know, Crossroads, it did really remind me of how much weirder the crossovers have gotten for Sonic's 30 years of history. It really tells you a lot that despite its ups and downs, Sonic has always gotten some really interesting takes when it comes to his own games and to appearing in into other franchises. But that's it I want to talk about in this video. Let me know your thoughts and opinions below. What is your favorite crossover that Sonic has been through, or what is your just favorite crossover in general? Let me know your thoughts and opinions down below about this. And so with that, leave a like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell for more videos, follow my Twitter and Instagram, and I'll see you guys next time. And remember this, once a legend, always a legend.